Hi, I work at LBrands. It is more than just panties. Sometimes we also sell beauty products, and for a while, purses. I've been there for about 3 years now, and it's kind of an interesting corporate. My first section I'm going to call the bespoke pattern because essentially, I'm pulling some lessons I learned trying to make costumes for individual people. So keep that in mind. So when you're talking bespoke stuff, it's unique to the word. Yes, I made that. It's based on a person's individual measurements. You're getting feedback very specifically from an individual person. You're getting, you think it's, unique because it is, in an instance, a unique thing. Can kind of think about that way with studies. Anytime you're talking to an individual participant, anytime you're doing an individual study, you're going to get unique things that you've learned from it. But can there be a larger pattern? Even if you're making something individual for a specific person, it's based on patterns and rules. A shirt is going to have the same sort of lines regardless if it's made for me, or for Poppy, or for any of you out here. But you're going to have some changes. There are only so many ways people are going to interact with things, even if you're learning very unique things about individual people in your studies. There are going to be just certain things that are going to keep coming up again and again, particularly if you're dealing with a certain similar population, or you're dealing with a certain similar sort of area of products. That happens. And depending upon how focused your organization is, it can be computer. The whole thing is to try to figure out what your norm is, because whenever you're not in your norm, that's where you're learning very interesting things. So you want to treat each of your research studies in a larger context, almost do a meta study on your own stuff. Yay! Hi, can you hear me now? All right. So the whole idea here is, again, I'm using heavy lifting on the word patterns here, is to find patterns, kind of develop your own library. So how do you establish a library, you ask? Well, first of all, you have to have data. When you're sewing stuff, particularly if you sew for multiple people, like I do, myself, my friends, you kind of get a pattern library. Some of these can be commercial patterns in my case, or even just, you have all of the measurements of different people. You have a library. How do you establish a library with research? Well, you first start by reporting consistently. Now, by reporting, I don't even mean the stuff that you're always sharing with people. You want to have a good idea of what you learned for a usability study, what you learned for an interview. Have a report. Try to consistently, report on that, meaning, try to record things in a way that you can look back later and understand what the heck you did. So with sewing, certain measurements need to be gathered for certain garments. I'm not going to measure your leg if I'm making a shirt. I'm not going to measure your neck if I'm, making a skirt. Trying to sort of, with your reporting, making sure you're recording the insights consistently, and again, do more than what you're just going to be sharing with people, because you're going to look back like 3 months later and be like, oh, okay, what did I actually learn here? So, an example, most of us are probably familiar with a usability study. Record more than just what you actually learned in the usability. Did you notice that you kept seeing the same sorts of people? Did you notice you were getting random comments to the side that you might want to investigate later? A usability study, even if that's like the only thing you can get more out of it because you're still talking to a person. And then expand your observations and themes for interviews across studies. My other thing, this is my favorite thing, tag your results. So, again, in a sewing pattern, there are certain things, certain language that's always used in understanding the pattern. I kind of think of that as tagging. Again, things to tag: features, audience, demographics, micro-interactions, brands, clients, customer journey phases, emergent themes, hypotheses. Whatever makes sense for what you are trying to do or try to do for your design team, that's what you need to tag. You can even make up tags if it makes sense in context. You know, what's mattering here is that you're capturing things that are searchable, flexible, because things might evolve, you know, so you can find things later. And then sort for your audience. So you're not the only one who's going to be looking at the results of your old reports. It can be as simple as an appropriately labeled table, which I use a lot of tables in my job. You know, again, who are you sharing your stuff with? If you're sharing it with a larger research team, they're probably going to want to be able to get down into the nitty-gritty, be able to find a specific video of a person who said something. But for, you know, maybe someone on more of the business side, all they want to know is, did we learn if they liked the color pink? You know, keep your details for yourself and your team, but keep them and make it so you can find them. Pull out only what is necessary for your audience. Again, it's not a bad thing that they only want to hear certain things. That's why you work as a researcher. The whole point is to be able to distill things out so it's understandable. And then, my other favorite thing, iteration. You know, you're not going to get it right the first time. You know, you're going to have, throughout your career, like, I think at this point, I've probably talked to about 1,000 different people in studies. You're not going to get everything right the first time. The way I first started tagging things didn't make sense because certain things in the business changed. Certain things in how our larger team changed. So I added new tags, or I changed them. I started reporting differently. I made different tables for different audiences. You know, flexibility. Try not to get caught up on what tools you're using. It doesn't matter if you're using Excel or Confluence or writing it down on paper and, you know, throwing it at people. What matters is how you're using that tool, and then if that tool doesn't work anymore for you, you figure out what you can use differently. And that's it.
So can you talk about how you actually go back and find tags and use it to inform design decisions or to present design decisions? Like, will you just intuitively notice something in a new study that you're doing and think, wait a minute, I think that relates to something I saw before, and go back and find those tags? Or how do you actually utilize this system?
All right, so one of the big things that I had to figure out, since I'm dealing with retail and particularly e-commerce, was organizing things via the customer journey. So that was kind of one of my starting points, was be like, all right, what am I learning about in this phase of the customer journey from people, and can I record that? And then how do I slice it up? Not only that, you know, I started tagging things based on, like, I have separate teams that I work with parts of things. So, you know, tagging it for that audience, sometimes you start to see things emerge simply because people are repeating stuff that they're trying to design. So it's a combination of trying to kind of figure out some formal structure to start with, And then being able to kind of dive deeply into that formal structure and then add things as you start to notice maybe repetition. Because a lot of times it's not going to be something from like 3 months ago that I'm suddenly noticing 3 months here. It's for a while, if you're iterating properly, people are going to get real obsessed about, trying this one thing for like a month. Make sense? Anything else? Hey.
Do you have like when you like say for example, would you go in with like a notebook that's already like kind of broken into areas so you know where to put things? And do you ever find that like, oh, I got nothing for this area and I got a bunch of things that fit nowhere? And I mean, it's kind of like there's an unknown unknown, like you don't know the structure of what you're going to find sometimes. You ever run into that issue?
I did it first when I first started working, and then I got really, really familiar with taking notes in a spreadsheet program instead of relying kind of more on like the hand, and that just being able to move things as you see them next to each other sometimes sort of reveals stuff. I do a lot of just like resorting things in spreadsheets.
Hi. So my question was, how would a student or like a designer use tagging or patterns to storytell, like as a storytelling technique?
That's a good question. So one of the things that I sometimes do is mildly quantify things. Again, you do not want to get confused for analytics because that is its own thing, and you want to keep qualitative being its own thing. But sometimes just seeing the visual of, like, this is a word that kept coming up again and again. This is a supercut of people squeezing a bra. Like all sorts of things like that are ways to kind of do that. You don't want to tell them the tag. You want to show them what that tag means, I guess. Okay.